Welcome to Imran Chess Lessons. Let's see what's Rosentreter Gambit. You're sacrificing your pawn to 3 different pieces. We will see what to do if they take with any of those, and for last, what to do if they retreat their bishop because they are scared for life to take the pawn. This opening has so much poison, even more than the fried liver itself. So let's say they take with a pawn. You are not taking it back. No. You are going to sacrifice another pawn with c3. Now this seems ludicrous. Not only is the position completely equal right now, Black has only one move or he goes downhill very fast. Only way for Black to survive this is to play nf6 and slowly enter the Greco Gambit main line, but most people do not do that. And when they do this, bingo. You now sacrifice your bishop on f7. This is a common move in the e4 positions and openings like Danish Gambit, Goring Gambit, and such. It's an aggressive sacrifice that gives you extreme advantage over your opponent, both on the board and mentally. And now you fork king and the bishop with qd5 and take it. Of course they don't have to go to f8 specifically, but that's what I included for this example because I want you to remember not to trade queens now. And if they play c2, don't want to take on b2 and open your bishop, you play nc3, castle. And qd3 to pick up the pawn. Your opponent's king is very vulnerable currently as he cannot castle. Also, it's almost impossible to bring back the h8 rook into the game right now. You can also play b3 and bb2 to have more pressure on the Black king. Don't trade since that equalizes the game and try to be aggressive. Currently it's an easy one. This version of the gambit has 63% win rate, which is extreme. Now this is a more interesting story. You do not take back on e5, no, that's too simple. Let's instead complicate things with b3. Now, most critical line is q6, keeping the equality, and in that situation you're going to have a bit of a fight. But move with 68% popularity here is nxf3 that simply loses to qxf3 because you're threatening mate on f7 and are winning a piece Black's c5 bishop. This version also has 68% win rate. But let's check out the critical line. You take the d4 knight with your bishop. But if this, you go e5. Castle, and gain back the pawn on d4. You have an equal position and are completely fine. I think that a worst case scenario being an equal position is pretty damn good. You take it with the knight. Now here we again go into 2 chapters. We need to see what happens when they take with the knight, and what if they take with a pawn. You castle here. If they play d6, you play this with c3 style like I've shown you in the chapter they take with a pawn. Against ng7, your plan is kind of boring but still very effective and gives you a good position. You play nd2 and go for nf3 to regain the pawn back. But let's see the most tricky version. 30% of players make this mistake, and only 45% of people punish it with e5, but do not finish it correctly, and only 10% of people do the full finisher combo. Play e5. Now, best move for Black is d5. There you will just take the knight, and then take the pawn on g7, and play around that pawn with re1, qh5, and bg5, and they cannot do anything. Position on low depth is 1, but as you go deeper, it's higher and your opponent can basically resign, as there will be no way to get rid of that pawn on g7, which means their rook cannot participate in the game. But you can see it has even more poison. Play re1. And f4. And since most people just take it, You immediately play bf4 to look to trade as you're up a piece for 3 pawns. What would you play in this position? And not only are you up a piece for 3 pawns, now you have that 1 pawn back, and this d4 pawn is more of a liability than a possible backup plan. Your opponent can basically just resign here. Now this is a much safer for black and more often approach. You still play b3, you just want to play b3 whenever you see a knight land on d4 in Rosentreter Gambit. It's a lot of pressure on that knight, and here black actually needs to waste another tempo just to retreat to not be down a whole pawn, as if you take the knight and black recaptures with a pawn, you can capture that pawn with your queen. And even if they play c5, which looks smart, you can play c3, as in Rosentreter Gambit you do not commit your b1 knight early, so it's not on c3 and you win a pawn anyways. Now, you actually want to be aggressive with qg4. And now play nc3. This has 2 possible endgames for black. I'll go over them in separate chapters as they are a bit more complicated, but white still comes out on top in each one of them. If black plays d6, here is the first poisonous endgame. You play q2, and then you castle long. And when the bishop arrives on e6, you play nd5. This can be in sequence of b6 being first, so you will delay castling long, but you still castle long at the end of your calculations. You take back with a pawn to keep the of bishops. When black chases you, you give up the d5 pawn completely and go bd3. And when black takes it, you hit them with bb5. Black must block, but now we hit with a knockout punch road 5. And now black might think their position is fine after castling since they're forking us. Wrong. We have b4. Black here is actually not in a great spot. It's a bit more complicated, but you will look to play qf3 and trade the queens. Your pawn structure is bad, but also is black's center pawn structure, and that one is actually more vulnerable because of your bishop pair being able to dominate dark and light squares once the queens are off. Your opponent might not even realize that this one advantage exists, and how big is it, even though they're up a pawn. You can also center your rook to pressure the center even more. Now this one is lost immediately, and it's so common to play d5 here. It's actually at 50% pay rate with a reasonable 77% loss rate because this is already 1.2 after qg3. Now, our opponent might think he just won a bishop for free, but a big problem is that there is nd5. And it's over. Wherever the queen goes, you pick up 1 rook and it's a 2 advantage and minimum. And with queens on the board, it's 5. And it just quickly enters an endgame that is completely winning. Now let's look at 2 retreat options for scared black players. b6 and d6. Both are completely lost for black, of course. bb6 just gives us the e5 pawn. And they cannot get one back. as we are threatening a fork on f7. What would you play in this position? And you might say, but it's just a pawn that is won back with qe7. Well, you're wrong. After this, we just play qf3. Now we are threatening f7 again, and it forces black into playing f6 to make a place for his knight to develop too. While we are not behind almost at all in development, we lack a tempo, but we got a pawn for it, so it's incredibly hard for black to try and prove us wrong with 2.5 position on our side. And if they take the pawn, you just take on f7. And bg5. And now what? Everything is protected and black is safe, right? Nope, you just take the knight. And just like that, you're up a rook and 2 pawns, and black has no development advantage to even try to fight back. Now black might go, now I protect my pawn. I must be safe, and you laugh at their face for them being wrong because they just lost the game. You simply take with a pawn the e5 pawn. Take the knight. And now the most classic knockout punch in Italian game again. Can you spot the ultimate finisher combo that wins you the game? Nice. And now go to d5. It's better than h5, because if we go h5, we're playing the Jerome Gambit where black can go key 6 and protect the bishop. While here black cannot, as if he tries with kf6, he runs into f4. And when he retreats, qg5 is a free queen. And this queen is so problematic here. It doesn't let black to try and develop. This can go even more downhill after g6, as you simply play f5. And by the time your opponent gets to develop, you go rf1. And simply play bh6 to punish your opponent even more. And game is truly over. Mate is here soon with rook and pawns, and the queen ready to attack the king. Also, f5 pawn is becoming a queen 100%. Big heart to you all that went through this study until the very end. Thank you for watching Imran Chess Lessons.